Time is running out on Luis Robert Jr. possibly returning, and Grant Taylor's season might be over. Let's discuss on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan, a contributor for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the fan side of the network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, White Sox manager Will Venable acknowledged time is running out on Luis Robert Jr. returning from his injury, and now it looks like Grant Taylor's season is possibly done. Let's discuss the impact of both missing the final weeks of the season in the first segment. Then Sean Burke returned to the mound yesterday, and one thing has become crystal clear on what he needs to do to become a solid starting pitcher. And finally, it's your mailbag questions and comments. And this episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Enter for a chance to win a dream golf trip for two to any golf tournament in the USA. Visit 5hewin.com for full rules and entry. No purchase necessary. Excludes Masters Tournament. Ends October 31st, 2025. Okay, so before last night's game, Will Venable acknowledged it's unlikely Luis Robert Jr. is returning from that hamstring strain. And, Chris Getz prepared us for this when they made the announcement on August 27th that Luis Robert Jr. is going back on the injured list. A tale as old as time, a tradition unlike any other, Luis Robert Jr. being on the 15-day or 10-day IL. It's basically on par as the season's changing. But I'm fine with Luis Robert Jr.'s season being over. Not even sure why it's needed to be discussed. I'm sure it was in the pregame scrum. Maybe Sports Illustrated's Jack Ankeny, because he wrote about it, asked it, and that's fine for him to ask. Hey, there was a possibility. What's the update? That type of stuff. Because the only reason why it would matter for Luis Robert Jr. to even come back towards the end of the season is just to prove, hey, he had a hamstring strain. Guys do get strains throughout the season. Guys pull muscles, that type of stuff, from Major League. But there's a difference, as this seems to always be like curtailing a season, limiting him to play, 100 games, that type of thing. And the only thing that I've seen with the eye test with him out of the lineup is the team is missing his ability to get to pretty much every fly ball. Michael A. Taylor, is pretty good at getting to most of the balls, but you can tell that, age is starting to creep up to him. He's not as fast as he once was in the outfield, not able to cover as much ground as Luis Robert Jr. does. But otherwise, the team is doing fine without him. Now, that doesn't mean the team should just pay him $2 million to go away, because I've talked about on past episodes, you still want to preserve that trade asset status, even though he will never come close to landing this white whale dream package that Chris Getz seems to think is out there. What is rough to see is Grant Taylor leaving last night's game with a strained groin. And it's because you would have liked to have seen him get some more innings to at least work on getting to his floor. And that is being an elite high leverage reliever. That's his floor. And I know that there's going to be some debate in the offseason, in White Sox Twitter world and us content providers and even the beat reporters about what should the White Sox do. Should they develop him to a starter still, his ceiling, or his floor? Remember, his arm is going to dictate all of that. But if his arm can only handle being a reliever, he still has some room to grow in being a high leverage, that Mason Miller elite high leverage closer reliever that he potentially could be. And you would have liked to see him get some more innings to work towards that. And also, the White Sox now have 2 less power arms in their bullpen after the team DFA'd Dan Altavilla. And as you saw last night, the bullpen is shaky. And now it's down 2 arms who can throw over 96 miles per hour. And yet, Tyler Alexander still remains on this roster. And I talked about it on yesterday's episode. I don't get why Alexander is on the roster. And now I don't get why he's on the roster over Altavilla. Because Alexander is a free agent after this season. Altavilla, while 30, and it may seem like he might not be on the roster next year, he still has the potential because he's under club control. He's not ARB eligible, I believe, until 2027? Or maybe he's arbor eligible after this year. No, he's arbor eligible after the season, but still, there's some club control. With Alexander, there's no club control. Now, I get to a degree why Altavilla was the roster sacrifice. That's why I'm not going to die on a hill and be like, oh, how can we DFA Dan Altavilla? He's got 5.45 FIP. And when you see that being a 2.4 ERA, that's likely not sustainable to be an effective pitcher. I mean, it's just not. He's getting a lot of help from the defense to get his outs. And a 12.3% walk rate, not great, Bob. But still, he was very good at limiting runs with a 90% left on base percentage rate compared to Alexander's rate being in the 50s. And he can throw 96. That's his average velocity. And I've seen him get to 98, 99 sometimes when he really ratchets back. Alexander, his average fastball velocity is 90. And the reason why, again, that matters, you need guys who have the stuff to potentially miss bats consistently. And how do you miss bats? Velocity. That's a big way to miss some bats. And now the White Sox have lost 2 of those arms. One by choice, one to injury. And, you know, every day you probably have heard me go over his numbers for Taylor and high leverage. That's where I think we're missing. We're going to miss, you know, a couple of games here for him to get these opportunities like he got last night to pitch in a high leverage situation, a crunch time situation. You know, those are the things that you want to see him get better because he has to get better at that. He's got to get better, you know, as, you know, developing into a pitcher, not a thrower. So you're losing some additional time to work on that. It's not a lot of time, obviously. It's not the end of the world if he misses the next 3 weeks, the next 2 weeks, but you would just like to see that time be there. And then when it comes to Robert Jr., here's what Venable had to say per White Sox on SI's Jack Ackney. Quote, "It feels like we're running out of time. No decisions have been made," Venable said. "We're still taking it day by day with him, but it feels like we're going to be up against it. Some of the early progress was maybe not there to kind of get excited about momentum and getting to a spot where we could get him built back up and put him on the field. So yeah, we're not sticking the fork in him yet, but we acknowledge we're probably running out of time here," end quote. Just stick a fork in him. There's no need to bring him back in this lost season. You know, and although before some of you jump into the comments, he's coming back next year. Death, taxes, and Chris Getz doubling down on the bet that he's making in terms of Luis Robert Jr.'s trade value is certainties. And the only way I see him not coming back at all next season is Jerry Reinsdorf, who he's done it before, obviously, but if Jerry Reinsdorf torpedoes basically gets his leverage in trying to trade Luis Robert Jr., because he technically doesn't have to trade him. It's under club control for 2 more years, even though it's club options. That's one of the reasons why Getz is not trading him for pennies on the dollar. And that's why he still foolishly believes he could get something as close to full value for Luis Robert Jr., even though pretty much every team has said we're going to only pay rental money, you know, rental deals for him. Because we're probably not going to exercise a $20 million option for an oft-injured, inconsistent center fielder. But if Jerry authorizes and says, no, I'm buying him out, that's the only way it's going to happen. And I don't see Jerry doing that to his hand-picked GM. Obviously, he's done it to other GMs, but this is the guy. He literally did not interview a single other soul. So I think Jerry's got a lot of faith in Chris Getz. So he's going to be back. Although I'll feed the pro dump Robert Jr. camp with this. The White Sox are 8-6 since Robert Jr. went on the injured list. Well, Sean Burke is back up with the big league club, and he showed he has the stuff to still be considered a core rotation piece. But he also showed he has one bar he must clear to confirm that. And let's discuss that after the break. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. The grape, ginger, and lime flavored shot brings the iconic taste of a golf course favorite to a non-alcoholic boost. Perfect for sinking birdies or making great memories with friends. It's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Whether you're out on the course or you just need a little extra push to power through your day, 5-Hour Energy Transfusion delivers the clubhouse flavor you love without ever leaving the green. And I know I could have used a 5-hour energy transfusion when my buddies and I back in high school, we decided to play 9 in like mid-March. It was a decent day. It was like maybe 50s. And we thought, oh, well, we can go play. Well, it turned out it was super chilly and super windy when, you're playing on a very windy day. Although I almost had my first chip in when I literally had the ball land in the hole and somehow bounce out. And I know the wind just wore us out, and I could have used that 5-hour energy transfusion. And golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors. The grape ginger lime flavor of 5-hour energy transfusion gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without ever leaving the course or chasing down the bev cart. And now you can amp up the fun even more. Just buy, snap, and enter for a chance to win a dream golf trip for 2 to any golf tournament in the USA. Tee up that trip. Visit 5hewin.com for full rules and entry. No purchase necessary. Exclusive Masters tournament ends October 31st, 2025. And the NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer right now. New customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. And I keep telling you, FanDuel's traditional money lines, the spreads, and over-unders are fun to play. But if you want to hit it big or at least double or triple your money, play FanDuel's parlays, props, and futures. For example, right now, they got a same-game parlay for tonight's Washington and Green Bay game featuring Josh Jacobs, Deebo Samuel, Jaden Daniels, and Jaden Reed, all scoring an anytime touchdown. The last time I checked, it was at plus 34.61. So if it hits and you say put $10 on it, that could pay out $346.21. So you think even, maybe you don't want to do that, but you think Deebo Samuel is going to score the first touchdown. That is at plus 1,200 the last time I checked. $10 on that, and if it hits, that pays out $120. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. And also make sure to turn on those notifications. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, you can get the audio version of the show on places such as Apple or Spotify. So make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball eventing with me and maybe some hope. All right. Sean Burke is back, and he was bringing some extra heat last night. I mean, he was hitting 100 on a pitch. Got to 99 on a fastball too. But he was also the same pitcher we saw most of the season before he got demoted. He struggled with his command. And while I was impressed with him getting up to 100 with that fastball, I was thinking, with his stuff, obviously, he can still be a core piece of the rotation. He just has to be more consistent with his command. Just please solve this command issue. Now, it's nothing earth-shattering when I say it. I've said it on past episodes every day, as you might recall. But when you put it into the context of what has happened with Jonathan Cannon, you can see why Burke still has the possibility to be a player that the team can move forward with, while Cannon, well, the best hope is him being a swing pitcher. Because, again, what you're also trying to see is, again, can these guys move the team forward? Can they adjust to when baseball makes the adjustment? And in Jonathan Cannon's case, it didn't happen. Sean Burke, the possibility still remains because Burke's stuff still has the potential to be special. Where if you compare it to Jonathan Cannon's stuff, and this is not to be, disrespectful because guys have carved out a nice career, but Cannon's stuff is mostly junk ball. It's that east-west stuff. It's needing deception. It's needing to get ground balls. But again, if the east-west stuff isn't hitting the corners of the strike zone, hitters are just going to lay off that stuff. They're not going to chase. And then that's going to have to force you to throw more stuff up over the plate. And if you don't have the velocity, if you're only throwing 92, 93, it's going to get hit a long, long way. Now, even if you throw 99, it can still get hit a long, long way because Burke got hit pretty hard last night. And where he showed, though, he has the chance to be special is he does walk the bases loaded in the second. Same old Sean Burke. But then he comes back with a nasty strikeout and then gets the ground ball to get the double play to get out of the inning. And that perfectly captured Burke's ability and his madly inconsistent stuff. And I was thinking too, like, when was the last time I saw a pitcher be like, still struggle with his command, but still have the special stuff to be an effective, good pitcher? And just off the top of my head, and I know I'm dating myself here, but I thought maybe, Wilson Alvarez. Now, I know Alvarez was a lefty where Burke was a righty, but Alvarez always had some command issues. He was always putting guys on base, but he had a great career in the 1990s with the Sox because he could consistently harness his stuff to minimize the damage. And that's the thing that Burke has to also get consistent at. Okay, if you get yourself into these adverse situations, can you minimize the damage? And in the second inning, he did. But he also gave up a home run in the first, and he also gave up a lot of hard contact when Tampa did make contact. So he's got to fix that too, because that's how you minimize damage. If they're still hitting the ball hard, it's only a matter of time before you're giving up a ton of runs. But you also want him to be consistent with his command so he can get through more innings. He only got through, 4 1/3 last night? And he has these days where he is just so wild in the strike zone, as Steve Stone has pointed out. Meaning, he's trying to get pitches into the strike zone, but then he's catching just way too much of the plate, basically just down the center. And that's the stuff where it gets teed up on then. It gets absolutely tattooed. Again, you want to kind of live more in the strike zone, but not where you're catching everything on the plate, unless he plans on throwing 100 miles an hour on every pitch. And I don't think that's going to happen. But if you can figure out this consistent command, you are talking about a guy who could still provide solid results as a number 3, number 4 pitcher. And if he's starting to incorporate more velocity, maybe a number 2 guy. And you think about that too, like Cannon, though, he's lost that sweeper that gave him the chance to be a viable back end of the rotation pitcher. I talked about it, I think, on last week's episode, about how the sweeper, he's almost abandoned it, and it's not getting, the outs that it was getting last year. Guys are hitting better off that sweeper. Now, maybe he can still develop the changeup that he's working on to get him back to being a back end viable rotation piece, but I don't see it happening because it's too much east-west stuff. And Jordan Lazowski of Sox on 35th, he was on the show on Tuesday pointing that out too. It's just too much east-west that makes you think, I don't know if he's going to rebound, where, again, Burke has more of that north-south stuff to potentially still overwhelm hitters, but he's got to harness it consistently, because if he doesn't, it's not going to mean a thing. He's just going to be in the same boat as Cannon then. Well, mail call. I didn't do the mailbag segment on Tuesday because I had Lazowski of Sox on 35th on. So let's do a Talk You Off Thursday segment instead after the break. You've probably seen a million ads for hair growth products and thought, sure, like that actually works. There are so many products out there, and it's hard to know which ones are actually going to do anything. And that's why you should give Nutrafol a closer look. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand, trusted by over 1.5 million people. And it's not just hype. This is a supplement clinically tested that targets the root causes of thinning and shedding hair with a proactive approach. And I know I have some hair issues, so you best believe I'm going to give Nutrafol a try. And I can feel good that I can give it a try because Nutrafol is NSF certified and backed by peer-reviewed studies. So see thicker, stronger hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. And for a limited time, Nutrafol is offering Locked On MLB listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com. That's Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code Locked On MLB. Again, that's Nutrafol.com, promo code Locked On MLB. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show's available on all major podcast platforms. So I got 3 mailbag comments or questions I want to address today. One I think is important because it involves opening up Japan as a talent pipeline for the White Sox, and then the other two are nice stabs at current and future lineups. So this one is from James, and he emailed me, what about Munetaka Murakami? Let me try this again. Munetaka Murakami for our first base problem next year. And he didn't say, the actual player. He said, what about this guy? And he sent me a link, and I took a look at it. So Murakami is a 25-year-old Japanese first baseman. Hopefully I pronounced it right. I tried to double check it before I started the show. And I looked at it, and I didn't even need to look at the highlights. I'm like, sure. If only, bring him in, because let's open Japan back up as a talent pipeline. And I think Japan is a great way to get guys who have basically been already developed, because I've, read where scouts say, Japan, Japanese baseball is almost like the equivalent of AAA or AA. And these guys are playing against probably some nasty pitchers too. They obviously develop better pitchers, but that's obviously been blown out of the water with Ohtani. You're seeing obviously a lot of good hitters now coming out of Japan. So why not get that pipeline opened back up? Because this has been sorely lacking in this organization. Because you think about it, this organization 20 years ago had Shingo Takatsu and Tadahito Oguchi. And Oguchi helped them win the 2005 World Series. They had some, they're starting to open up that pipeline, and then they've just got nothing out of the Pacific Rim. And you got to open that up, because, again, it's the potential immediate boost that these guys can provide. Now, not all of them are going to be Ohtani or Yamamoto in terms of two things. One, not all of them are going to want to sign with the Dodgers. And two, not all of them are going to be superstars. But some of these guys can be like a Gucci. So go get them. Go find them. Once they're available on the market, pay the posting fee. I'm all for it. I know there's a pitcher. I think my buddy Bez from OnTapSportsNet.com, he's posted it too. And I've said, I'm all for it. We got to open Japan back up. And I don't really want to get too much into the White Sox report, the report of the White Sox already making a $6 million signing bonus agreement with a 12-year-old from out of the Dominican, just because, it's going to be years from now. Who knows what's going to happen? But hey, if they're going to focus on the Dominican Republic, and I'd still say they got to focus on Venezuela, because, again, you got a great reputation with Ozzie Guillen there. And then, there's still nothing wrong with tapping into your Cuban reputation with Minnie Minoso and Jose Abreu and Luis Robert Jr. But spend a little bit more money in terms of having the presence in Japan, because, again, you can get these guys that can help you out pretty much right when you sign them. It's not like they're going straight to the minors. And if you mention Rico Nishida, he went to Oregon State first, and then they drafted him. That type of stuff. All right, so John, he put this in the YouTube community for a lineup that he'd like to see for the rest of the season. White Sox lineup should be 1, Brooks Baldwin, right field. 2, Miguel Vargas, left field. 3, Andrew Benintendi, center field. 4, Curtis Mead, third base. 5, Kyle Teal, catcher DH. 6, Tim Elko, first base. 7, Colson Montgomery, shortstop. 8, Chase Maedra, second base. 9, Edgar Caro, DH, catcher. And then he says, because I did respond back, I'm like, because I disagree with a few of this. But he says, my goal is to get the best bats in the lineup. At the same time, Vargas, Benintendi, and Baldwin are the only 3 in that lineup who have played the outfield. None of the others have, even in the minors. Baldwin has played all 3 outfield spots, but Benintendi has played only left field and center field, while Vargas has played only left field. White Sox currently have an abundance of good hitting infielders, yet a shortage of good hitting outfielders. Maybe offseason trades can correct that problem. Elko has obviously struggled against Major League pitching so far, but it's only a small sample size. I'm still hopeful that his minor league production will eventually translate. So, first of all, John, again, I appreciate you hopping into the YouTube comments. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. I agree with 5 of your ideas. The Benintendi in the center, though, at this point in his career, I just don't see him covering enough ground. And where I would deviate is I get his angle of you're trying to put the best bats out there. And there's nothing wrong with suggesting putting the best bats out there. But I think what we got to all have to figure out and understand when it comes to roster construction is sometimes that's a challenge front offices are having because you're trying to balance run production because you need to score runs, obviously. Like that Moneyball concept has never changed. But you need to have also run prevention. Go back to the Moneyball Hollywood's curriculum thing where they showed, hey, you got to score this many runs, and then you got to make sure your opponents only score this many runs against you. And I think what sometimes happens is some teams, because it's cheaper, embrace run prevention versus run production. So that's why I see where he's coming from. But you kind of have to have that balance. So while I know Michael A. Taylor doesn't have a high average right now, and I know he's older, he can still play center field well. That's why I would prefer to have him out there. And he does provide some additional help into the lineup on the margins like slug. We saw it yesterday. Mike Tauchman, he can provide some help on the margins by being a professional hitter who hits around 270, 280, has a on base over 350, has a slug over 400, even though he doesn't put the ball over the fence. That type of stuff. Now, if you want to say, hey, I would like to see Will Robertson because he had an amazing catch on Sunday in left field. Okay, I can get on board with that because why not give him an opportunity? Because if you look at the just the eye test, the guy is built like a tank. I was even saying when you look at him, you're like, how is this guy not crushing 30 to 35 home runs? And that speaks to, again, how hard baseball is. So that's the only thing, but I get the point and I appreciate the comment. Then my guy, Brian, he proposes this lineup for next season. He starts off with this comment because actually him and I were going back and forth in exchange. And I want to share this. I'll wait on a year on him because I asked about would you want to extend Caro. I'll wait on him a year and my draft they are pieces, but they need that solid middle of the order run producer. And I don't want to have players take up spots that you can upgrade on. I believe it was Caro, but either way. In terms of the lineup for next year, in my world, left field open. I would keep it open too. Center field, LRJ. Right field, B. Montgomery. He shows he's ready. Third, Vargas. Shortstop, C. Montgomery. Second, tricky spot for my draft for now. First, Josh Naylor, DH. Teal for 70 games. Caro for 80. And then I'm assuming flipping, for both at catcher. Now, first, I would actually love to have Josh Naylor only for the simple reason I am tired of watching him destroy the White Sox. I would be, obviously I would love for him to actually hit like he does against the White Sox. But even if he hit just 200, I know it's not a great take, but even if he hit 200 against the White Sox, with the White Sox, I'd rather have that than watching him can still look like a Hall of Famer every time he plays the White Sox. And if he stays in the American League, that would be trouble. And I like open because, with Benintendi, I'm getting so tired of him struggling through most of the season and then finishing strong in September to provide those empty calorie numbers. Because that's what he's doing right now. It's empty calories. If you're going to finally decide to show up, and I give him credit for being a fast healer. I give him credit for actually being the team's best bat at the way beginning of the season before he got hurt. But throughout the rest of the season, he's just been this struggling presence. So either contribute like your $17 million says you should, because the White Sox gave him the richest free agent contract in organization history. Just shows you how much they spend. So either start living up to that faith, that belief, even though it's a previous GM, or just pay him to go away. That's my stance. Pay whatever you need to pay. I don't care if it's to another contender to get player to be named later. Just get him out of here. My only other thing that I would say is Lenine Sosa, though, could get some DH and maybe Teal in left field. I know we're all like, I'm just saying, suggestions, that type of stuff. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Game Night, every game, every night until a World Series champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. And I'll be back tomorrow to just kind of go over how the White Sox did today against the Rays, and also kind of go over what they're going to do this weekend. You can also leave comments about today's discussion in the community page on YouTube. You can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com or leave them on X, formerly Twitter, at LockedOnSox or at ToddJDub. Have a great day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.